Welcome to Beyond Time Signatures. So today with us we have Sithu Aye. You guys know him from his personal work under the name Sithu Aye, and Sithu is an OG of the scene. So welcome to the podcast, Sithu. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. It's a lovely, frigid morning in Scotland. Um, yeah, I'm just very happy to be here. Thanks for the invite. And calling me an OG definitely makes me feel old. But yeah, I've been doing this for a while, and it's a pleasure to talk to you today.
Lovely, lovely. I wouldn't call you old. I would call you more matured. So
Matured,
that's
yeah.
that's how I would put it. But yeah, man, it's lovely to have you. And I would like to begin by asking you how or what music were you listening when you got into playing guitar?
Yeah. So when I started playing guitar, I think I was around 12 years old, first year of high school in Scotland, and I was listening to bands like the Red Hot Chili Peppers. My friend group and I sort of had a divergence in music taste because we listened to bands like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and then discovered like guitar player greats like Jimi Hendrix and um, all the classic bands like Metallica, Led Zeppelin. I'm trying to think of others. Those are the ones that come to mind just now. And then around the age of 15, 16, I discovered Dream Theater. Um, and bands like Tool, and I also discovered like the shreddy world. So I will remember watching the G3 in sorry, my cable's all caught up here. I'm trying to keep it from
That's totally
flinging
fine.
across. I remember watching G3 in Tokyo, I believe. It was Yngwie Malmsteen, Steve Vai, and Joe Satriani. And Steve Vai, being Steve Vai, had like this ridiculous like 3 guitar thing.
Yeah,
And Yngwie was like the epitome of 80s hair metal. And it was just a world of guitar playing I'd never discovered. So through that I got like the shred guitar stuff, and then I discovered like the prog side with Dream Theater and Tool, and I discovered more players like Paul Gerbert, obviously John Petrucci through Dream Theater. um so yeah, through my sort of formative years of high school and guitar playing, I went from like sort of the more dad rock side into what's now like the dad rock of prog. And that's sort of the music that introduced me to that style of guitar playing. So yeah.
that's awesome to hear. So like I would say bit of both, like rock and
Hmm.
metal and stuff. So that's awesome. And I know for a fact that you are a lot into anime. So
Hmm.
I just want to gauge, like at what point did anime OSTs and like J rock, J punk inspired you, and like you found yourself playing or taking inspiration from that genre in your playing.
Yeah. So it wasn't actually much through high school. I think I watched Evangelion and Cowboy Bebop in high school, which are obviously big classics, but it wasn't really until like streaming became a big thing with like video
Okay.
streaming, because when I was in high school, YouTube had just started, and the internet was a bit of a wild west for this kind of stuff. And back then, like, I guess the only way you could ever watch anime was if you like downloaded it through like torrents and pirating and stuff like that. Through so And I think when I started uni, legal streaming had just started, and then there was a website called Crunchyroll, and
Crunchyroll,
that's when it,
yeah.
yeah, and they, I think, were kind of one of those original pirating sites turned legit. And back then when streaming was cheap and good, where Netflix was the next big thing, I was able to watch and consume a lot of anime during the beginning of during the first couple of years in university, and that's when like I'd also discovered the sort of coincidentally, that's also when I discovered the sort of djent music, so like Animals as Leaders and the original like Bulb demos and Periphery and stuff like that. So I was also watching a lot of anime then as well, and yeah, I don't know, I just really like upbeat music. I like, at the moment, I mostly listen to like K-pop, which might sound disappointing to some people, but like it's easy to listen to and it's upbeat. And uh anime and J-pop music is in general, like, I think a lot of it is very upbeat. A lot of it has a lot of jazz influence as well, which I kind
True.
of discovered after the fact. If I'm being honest, I was completely winging it with all the senpai stuff. I don't think I really had the style down when I started, but I just like the vibe, and I just thought it would be a dumb fun idea to do for part of my music as well, since a lot of it before was quite like serious in a way. So
Yeah,
yeah, and then like I said, it's just the vibe, it's the upbeat nature of it, and like I said, the jazz influence and all of that just is really appealing to me.
that's wonderful. If can you recollect like what animes, like soundtrack inspired you the most?
Um, Honestly, it was I can't remember the exact animes, but it was like just trashy rom coms. Um,
Oh,
they
okay.
seem to have the trashy rom coms seem to have like the sort of the J-pop sort of synth pop kind of stuff, and I like that vibe as well. Actually, there was the opening for Madoka Magica had a really fun opening. Lots of random key changes, and yeah, it was that kind of vibe that I really liked. The more sort of shonen animes, the big like Dragon Balls and stuff, were more in the J Rock side,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I think I probably took a bit less influence from that just because um, I had already had like a big background in rock and metal music, so it was the pop and the electronic side that
Yeah.
was more interesting to me. And it was also just the harmonies and the chords that they used as well. I think it's stuff that is very I've over time I've learned that this stuff is very established throughout a lot of Asian music or the Korean music as well. But like back then, like those tropes in those musical tropes in anime music and Japanese music in general were stuff that I found, like I said, fun and enjoyable. So yeah, I think it was just like I said, the trashy rom coms, like anime that I can't even remember the name of. Just sort of like a one season and done kind of thing. And it's so funny now because that stuff's so established. Like I don't know if you've heard "Idol" by Yoasobi, which was everywhere throughout Asia. But like that song is like it is absolutely nuts that like a pop song in Japan has that many key changes and funny things and going on. It's just kind of weird. Like to Western sensibilities, that kind of music is weird. But then I see videos of Yoasobi performing in Hong Kong and in Korea, and like I don't know, people in Asia love this stuff. So I think
Yeah.
it's just different, It's a part of the appeal.
I think it has more to do with culture because even for like Indian music, a lot of it is in Phrygian and stuff like harmonic
Mm-hmm.
minor. Like there are certain modulations. Like I would say it goes from uh, let's say Ionian to Aeolian, and
Mm-hmm.
then it comes back and stuff. And it's mostly to do with establishing a mood and stuff. And like they would do like a fourth key change to make it more sound more upbeat and stuff
Yeah.
and things like that. So I think that's how the East has its own take on music. And there's
Mm-hmm.
this one I don't know if you know of it, but it's a quite recent, I wouldn't call it too recent, but Domestic Girlfriend is an
Mm-hmm.
anime, and it has an opening, like its first opening, in my opinion, like it's one of the most uh interesting, like vocally, like it's a female vocalist, and she does like she has a very strange texture to her voice in the start, and the song starts with a piano ballad, and then it like goes into a fry scream, and then the whole
Yeah.
band comes in and stuff. It's really awesome. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember that one. I can't recall it to mind right now, but I just know that like they just aren't afraid to do weird stuff. I think the K-pop, for instance, like is so. I think K-pop is going through what Western music is went through, in that like everything has to be safe and sanitized and stuff like that. Like
I
there's
see.
there's not a lot of like breaking the mold, and I think it's just because Korea, as an like, even though it has widespread appeal, like the market is controlled by like a few very big companies, and they're
Mm.
basically the tastemakers in music. Whereas I don't think Japan has that so much. Obviously, like Sony's a huge deal in Japan, but like underground scenes and everything, like they just, I don't know. I feel like they get away with more. Like they'll write a pop song, and the guy who composed it is a big jazz head, and he'll just throw in like a crazy like 251, just lots and lots of key changes before the second verse kind of thing, and they seem to get away with it more. Also, the cultural thing is quite interesting as well, because I don't know if a lot of people, I don't talk about it too much, but I'm from Burma or Myanmar, so and I'm an immigrant to the UK, so I'm going through what every immigrant goes through, where there's a clash of, you know, Eastern culture and Western culture, and Burma itself is at the sort of, it's in between India, Bangladesh, China, Thailand. So there's like a lot of culture mixing within Burma as well. So I don't know. Maybe that's probably why I still find a lot of appeal in Asian and East Asian music as well, because I am from that part of the world. So
Fair
yeah.
enough. Fair enough. Totally. And yeah, so, and I think even the video game music has a lot to do with the spicy nature of Japan's music, because
Mm-hmm.
video game music needs that sort of tension
Mm.
throughout their soundtracks and stuff. So yeah. And you also mentioned about getting into Djent at that time. So I'll ask you what I've asked every guest from that era on the
Yeah.
podcast, which is, there's this website, a holy grail called 7string.org. So I want to ask you about your experience, like when you found out about it, what you got from it, and how did it shape your early, I would say, like, Djent based inspiration and influence in your music.
Yeah. I mean, it was just a different time on the internet. I think in general, when people ask me how do you make it on the internet and on social media, and how you market yourself as a musician, I honestly couldn't tell them, because like it was just a different time back then. It was a lot more. There was less algorithms. There was less, because people have to understand and game these algorithms to a certain extent to grow on modern platforms. And back then, the internet was very much a wild west, and just having forums, like I don't even know if people still use forums. I think like Reddit is probably like the most popular kind of thing where people still kind of chat. But the 7 string format, I can't even remember how I stumbled upon it, but I think it was around 2009, 2008 when I started university, where I stumbled upon it. And yeah, people just, the whole recording at home thing was very new. I remember, like, obviously Misha Mansour was one of the original people that was doing the whole recording at home thing, and posting stuff to 7 string. There was a Chimp Spanner as well. I remember
Chip
that.
Spanner, yes.
Yeah, he was quite influential back then. And also shout out to Keshav Dar from Sky Harbor. He was
Sky
also very
Harbor.
active. I remember interacting with him all the way back then, and it was a pleasure to tour with him back in 2016 as well. Lovely, lovely guys from Sky Harbor. But yeah, he was there as well, and just posting demos. His demo sounded incredible. Like, I remember being blown away, and just like hearing what these guys are doing, and a lot of them were just at home at a laptop or behind a computer, like um similar situations, probably like students or just like guys with regular jobs. And the gear that we take for granted now, with all the plugins and the Axe FXs and the sort of the helixes, and then the I can't even remember the name of the one that a neural DSP came out,
Quad
the Quad
Cortex.
Cortex. Yeah, that's the one, Quad Cortex. Like, that stuff like just didn't exist. So I was a university student, didn't have any money to like splash out on big pieces of gear, so I just looked up free plugins, and found out that like you don't need a drum kit. You can just, like, it was a lot of discovery and a lot of just trying different things, and there was no real process to it. I would just find some things, try them out, and I'd post them to 7 string, and then the people on that forum would just comment and like give you their honest opinions. And it felt it was honest, but it wasn't like hating. Like, no one was like, oh my god, this is trash, you just stop. Everybody tried to be sincere and help you out. And yeah, and I met people like Pliny as well on that forum. He was doing exactly the same thing. It was just like a different world. I think nobody really knew what they were doing. A lot of stuff that people figured out that worked for them, they were just doing that. It was the same for myself as well. Like, I mean, I listened back to the mixes from back then, and even like the first mix on Cassini, and it's not very good, but it was just part of
Process.
trying to, yeah, just the process of doing stuff, and just being okay with the fact that it wasn't very good, but you were learning by doing. And I think for me that was a big part of it. I still to this day am learning by doing. I don't think I've really, I would never call myself like a professional mix engineer or producer, but like there's just stuff I'm learning all the time, and I think I found that really enjoyable about that phase of the sort of music internet. And like the forums were definitely a big part in forming how, like, us as a collective group of people who were making that style of music at that time, those definitely helped to shape how we thought about producing and writing music. So yeah, it definitely was a different time. I think lots of learning, lots of meeting people, lots of also just learning about how big the world is, and like interacting with people from all the way across the world, Australia, India, the US, Canada, like also just hearing. I remember there was an album by a Polish artist called Pietrek Gruska. I don't know if I'm doing his name justice, but he'd released an album called Cosmogenesis, and it was this sort of space, sort of instrumental prog Djent album, and I was like, okay, this is totally up my street. Um, he's never done anything since, but that
Oh man.
just that album, and I think the first Chimp Spanner album as well, first Animals Leaders album, like all the stuff was just so cool to me. I was just like, I want to do that as well. So yeah.
That's really like very nice to hear that that's how it started out. And yeah, I mean, I'm curious about like your friendship with Pliny, because I might be wrong on this, but I think Pliny reached out to you more in the start, right? Or
I can't remember. I
you
just
can't
remember
remember?
that we just um I he released a record under the name Halcyon. And I think some of those songs actually made it onto his first album as well. Um but yeah, no, I just love this playing. He was a cool guy, and it's just amazing to see how successful he is now, like thinking about back then. But it's just, yeah, you just reached out to people and talked, and you like the same stuff, and then he's a guy who has a lot of ideas, and you can really tell in his music because he's never no two one of his releases are the same, and he was the same back then, just always full of ideas. He was
Nice.
playing Skyrim, which I'm still doing now, which is mad to think all the way
Yo,
back then.
nice.
I play modded Skyrim a lot. It's one of my favorite games to play. And he was just like, yeah, I want to make a song on the split EP that sounds like I'm in a Skyrim tavern, and like he would just have these ideas. And I think that's one thing I really enjoyed about speaking with him back then. Like he like I found that in common with him. Like we would just have ideas. Like not all of them good because I released 3 anime EPs, but like we had ideas, and they're, yeah, it was like that. Like there was no rule book, there was no playbook. People just had ideas and they went with it. And I think the particularly like thing that I'm most grateful for is that like other people liked what I was doing and what other people in the scene were doing. And I also just appreciate that everybody got along. There was no like, oh, we're doing the same thing, we're like competing with each other. No one ever felt like that. It was just like, oh, you're doing the same thing that I'm doing. That's cool. Let's hang out, kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I assume that's how you guys first started touring too, right?
hmm Yeah, like just meeting people, just speaking to people. Because I remember I met. I don't know whether it was through Facebook or the forums, but like after the forums were kicking off, Facebook was also very new back then, and like they hadn't set an algorithm for reach. It was still just like, because I'm pretty sure in the early days of social media, no one at Facebook and no one at these companies knew what they're doing either. Like because Facebook
Yeah.
was started as like a way to judge people's looks on university campuses. Like it was complete. It was like, it sounds terrible to say now, but like that's like the dude bro culture of social media and tech in general was definitely a thing back then. And but then it transformed into just a way that people could speak to each other over the internet. And then when you made a Facebook page back then, when you made a post and people followed your page, it just went to those people. Like there was no
Yeah.
like, you have to try time the post to game the algorithm. It just went to people. So um there was a lot of groups back then, there was a lot of pages back then, and like you just made a post and people would see them, and if they found it interesting, they'd click on it and listen to the music. And I feel like I met a lot of people on Facebook that way as well. So for touring, there was the Simon Garrett from TechFest, because I don't even know if TechFest is still a thing anymore. I think COVID just did a number on a lot of sort of smaller music events. But I remember he reached out to me to do TechFest, and then Hayato from Cyclamen, Japanese band, reached out to me if I wanted to do a show supporting Protest the Hero in Japan. And then like that was around the time that I'd quit my
Nice.
job to do music full time. So it was, it still had the vibe of the forums in a way. Like it was still just people listening to music, thinking it's cool and reaching out. And to be honest, I think a lot of that still exists. It's just maybe social media isn't the place where you find this anymore. And maybe it's just harder for that to happen organically. But music is an industry full of people, and people, it's the same as any other industry in that the relationships matter and getting to know people matter. So yeah, just people reaching out. Like the first Europe tour I did was with Sky Harbor, and it was just it was Devesh from Sky Harbor who reached out to me about that. And yeah, like it sounds so simple, right? It's just people reaching out to each other, but that's the core of how a lot of this started. And then different artists had different trajectories as well. So because I remember I didn't tour anywhere near as much as some of the other artists, just because it's just very expensive, and you have
Fair
to commit
enough.
a
Yeah.
lot of time and money into it. And I like, to be honest, I've not toured since COVID, and I think I don't have any regrets about the tours I did as well. I think I did some really cool things going over, Japan, Europe, the UK, North America. If I could do more, I think I would. But it's just, I think I'm just at a phase of my life where I need to be in the one place. Um, it feels really weird to talk about, like planning families and like planning a life together with somebody. But like that's the phase of my life where I'm at. So the touring, I've not got any plans for that, but it's something I'd like to do again at some point.
Yeah, that's totally fine, man. I mean, I guess we can't be 20 forever, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm 21 right now. So like, but hearing stuff like that really puts things into perspective, about like, there are phases in life and we don't think the
Hmm.
same way ever. But I would like, if it was 2 years ago, I would be like, oh, why is he not touring? Like, what's he why, like, not you particularly, but
Yeah.
anyone who was like, awesome, and then they actively took a stance of like, slowing down. I would always question their moves, but totally get why people do
Yeah.
that. Because like, when we love something with passion, there comes a point where you start to uh, question yourself that, hey, is okay, there are other things too. This is not the only thing now,
Yeah.
and stuff. So I totally get that, man. And I think I speak on behalf of everyone that if you get to tour again, I mean, it would be so big for everyone. Because David recently started shared his tour that he's going to do with intervals next year.
Hmm.
So everyone's excited, and I feel like, people are going to be equally, if not more excited, when you announce something like that in the future. No pressure, but
Hmm.
just saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think with touring as well, the I was meant to go on a tour with Chon and Jakob Zitecki in 2020, but then obviously, in 2020
COVID
the Fire
happened.
Nation
Yeah.
attacked, COVID happened. It was such a surreal time. Like I don't know if it's like this for you, but I just don't remember much of what
it's
happened. It's like if you're stuck inside and that's all you can do, it's like your brain just doesn't seem to register that. So that was such a difficult time for the music industry in general. But after I had an offer to tour after COVID, and I was just looking at the costs associated with touring, and it was just unbelievable. I think it was triple, double or triple what I would normally pay for a van and a
shit.
driver. Um, and I was just not in a position where I could afford that. um like the realities of touring for me are, it's probably the same for a lot of solo artists. Different for bands, because bands, a lot of the time, the bands that know what they're doing, they establish, a business as the band, and the business as a band is the one that deals with expenses. Whereas, um at least the way I did it, I was, I was personally liable. So when I toured, like, I paid the van companies or the logistic companies. I paid for flights, I paid for visas, I paid for the bands. So the person who got paid at the end was me if there was anything left over. And like very quickly, I learned that tours are very expensive and it's very difficult to make money at that level of touring, because we're talking like, supporting gigs going around Europe where you're paying thousands of euros for transport costs, but you're making about 100 euros playing a night. So it's very much like you have to invest a lot of time and effort. And like, I'm not going to say that, I think that I deserved more. I wish things were different. It was just the way things are. You have to start out from that level, and you have to prove to promoters and other bands that you're good to play with, and that you're worth the money that they're paying you. But yeah, after COVID, it was kind of crazy. And like I said, I was starting a new phase of my life. And I got married last year as well. So
Nice.
it's just,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. But it was just a different phase of life. And I think I was just better suited to just, stay in the one place and do like focus more on just earning money through the passive income I was doing as well. And I had a lot of ideas for like doing the remixes of, I think I did like a 10-year, what was the release called?
Reimagination and
Yeah.
remaster. Yeah.
Yeah, so I had those kind of ideas back then as well. So it was just I think personally for me, I was just like, I wasn't in the right sort of financial and headspace to go touring. We'll see how it goes. Like if I do once I get around to doing more music, we'll see how it goes. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's
fingers crossed.
that's
I
how it
mean,
crumbles.
for me personally, what would be an add-on is the fact that Liam McLaughlin plays with you, and he's just
Mm-hmm.
a treat to watch because like he's this fusion guy who like shreds and like stuff. So
Yeah.
it's really awesome. So yeah, and he's Scottish too, right? If I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I think during the it was literally the Sky Harbor tour where I was, what my friend Martin, who had played with me in Japan, I think about 3 weeks before the tour, told me that he wasn't able to because of his work commitments. So we were just needing somebody short, like to tour with, and I just put a message on social media and spoke to two people. But I think Liam, just because he was in Scotland, was just easier to organize logistics with him. And yeah, the guy is he's just a lovely person with a lot of enthusiasm and energy for music. And you could tell, like, if you've ever seen me play with Liam, he's always smiling. He just loves what he does. He has a lot of like, if you talk to him about like music that he likes or music theory, like he's full of knowledge, full of enthusiasm. Just one of those people that's just a joy to be around. So yeah, nothing but love
Yeah.
for the guy.
I took a lesson from him 2 years ago, so that's how I know of him. But yeah,
Right.
you're right. He does speak with a lot of enthusiasm whenever it's a topic of his interest. And yeah, he taught me about like using more 4-to-1 resolutions than 5-to-1 because it sounds more pleasing
Mm-hmm.
if you have the correct bass note for that
Mm-hmm.
resolution. So I was like, yeah, cool. So I've been trying to, ever since then I've been trying to do that more. So yeah.
Right.
But yeah, from what you just said that apart from like logistics and money, I would also assume like back then things were less convenient in terms of how much gear you would have to carry for each tour rather than now, because now you can just have a quad cortex and a laptop and you're good to go. But I assume things were different back then, right?
Um, actually, no, it was the same. I think
Really?
I remember when I went to America, it was just a laptop. We programmed the patch changes on our Axifxs. The Axifxs went in a backpack on the plane. And the guitars went in the hold. it was very, very like take as little as we can.
Hmm.
Um, the drum kit, we literally bought a drum kit from Guitar Center and then returned it at the end of the tour because they
Nice.
had a 30 days no questions asked money back guarantee. So we basically got like a Guitar Center drum kit rental. Um, and yeah, with just two XFXs, laptop. I think the bass was just dark glass pedal direct into front of house. We just did it as minimally as possible. Um, I think the rig's gotten a bit more sophisticated since then, since we got like in ears for the 20 the 2019 tour that we did with intervals, and the headline tour I did in the UK was we had the in ear setup as well, but that was a very basic in ear setup. So yeah, I was very much because of the scale of the touring that we're doing, where it was like, you know, we're supporting other bands and we weren't like the headliners, and I wanted to make sure that it was as like low key as possible. Not to say low key because Axe effects are like obviously very expensive pieces of equipment, but like that does what an entire rig will do. And some guys love it because it's just one cable into the back of Axe effects and that's it. Like
Right.
they don't have to deal with stage sound and miking things up. So yeah, we did it the same way. If anything, what tends to happen is that if when bands get more budget and more profile, the rigs get bigger. So I think back then everybody was just, you know, using helixes or XFXs and stuff and just trying to keep it as low key possible. And then what they do is they expand the rigs to, you know, have more pedals and amps and cabs just for a more analog sound, or just I don't know, just interests change as well. I think this stuff was the cutting edge when I started touring, and like a lot of acts swear by it, but now everybody's using amps again just because they can. Like, you know, a good example is like, you know, Misha and Tosin from Animals, Leaders and Periphery, they all toured like this with just axe effects and stuff, and then they started adding cabs to stage, and now they tour with amps. So it's just
Yeah.
I think the progression is actually the inverse. You're limited by your space and your budget, so you take the bare minimum, and then as that increases, you go for more. And I think I'm I'm late into the amps game, but if I had a choice, and if like, you know, there was no constraint on time or budget, and I'm not the one lifting all the stuff into the venue, then maybe I'd go for the same setup as well.
Yeah. So, like, do you have a preference when it comes to amps and stuff?
No, I think I'm very utilitarian in terms of I just want something that gives me results. Um, so the Axe FX, I still have an Axe FX 2 from 2015. Like it still works. It still sounds good. I never got an Axe FX 3, so like it still sounds good. It still gets me results. I did my last release, Kindness, by miking up a Fender Blues Junior and using Horizon Devices
Precision
uh,
drive.
pre- precision drive in the Apex for tones and stuff like that. So for me, it's just a curiosity thing. I just want to see if I can do it. But what I've learned from then is I've actually switched. So what I used to do is I would used to just record into the XFX, take the audio out and record the audio. So it was like very much like a one and done thing. I couldn't manipulate the tracks as much as you could if you did DIs. And now I've actually switched to using DIs because of recording with an app. So my next release, I'll probably use the XFX again, but I'll be using DIs so that, and I'll reamp it through the XFX. So it's just funny the stuff that you learn from changing your process completely. So by recording with an amp and a microphone, the thing I got away from that was, oh, I should be using DIs because I can just reamp it, and if I don't like something about the tone, I can just do it again and reuse the DI, as opposed to just I kind of like the whole recording and having it just be there.
Hmm.
But I think now I think I value the flexibility, and in terms of my goal of just getting the best sound I can with what I have, I think using DIs was the most useful thing I learned from doing my latest release.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like, Kindness was a great release. I
Thank
really,
you.
yeah, I really enjoyed it thoroughly, and yeah, it did have a little nostalgic guitar tone, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So now that you said that you used a Fender amp for that, so it does make a little bit sense why it felt that way. So that's nice to hear. Speaking of that, I know like you were going to do like a fusion EP and then you canceled it. So like and I please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your reasoning was that you wouldn't be able to do justice of how you wanted it to sound. So that was probably the reason why you canceled it, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I think that how I felt in my head is I just felt like a guy cosplaying a jazz fusion guitarist, and I think I really like jazz and I really like fusion. It's just I've not immersed myself in that world in the way that I should have to do it justice. And if anything, what I tend to do is I like to pick and choose from all my different influences to create what I think is sort of my sound, or like how I like to compose music. So I think moving forward, I don't think it does me or the style of music I'd like to emulate justice if I just like I want to make something that's one style. I think everything should be. I think like I enjoy it more personally when there's a melting pot of all my different influences and all the genres that I like to take influence from. So
Right.
I think it was limiting in a good way in that like I learned a lot, but I just feel like I'm not that kind of musician who does very well when they're trying to play one style. I think I have a lot more enjoyment writing and I have a lot more enjoyment playing when there really isn't a limitation in terms of stylistic ideas. Um, and I think these things also go in cycles. So, like for instance, a lot of my music recently has followed like verse chorus structures. Like Kindness is no different as well, and I think that stem from doing the senpai stuff as well because I was basing it off of pop music, which has that verse chorus bridge
Right.
structure. And but then if you go back to 2016, which is 8 years ago, wow, I'm old. But
No, you're not.
that set course was a very linear writing, so that I didn't have verses or choruses. I had musical themes that I'd want to reinsert at specific points, but there wasn't like a set verse or anything. Like I just wrote, and I'm at the part of the cycle where I think I want to go back to that. Taking what I've learned about production from the last few releases, but go back to the linear style of songwriting. So um, I'm quite excited to see. I've not started writing. I had a few plans for ideas and ideas for releases. And I think I'm still the same sort of 21-year-old university student in that like I have a lot of ideas. Not all of them are good, but I just have lots of ideas for releases. And I think as I've gotten older, I've gotten a bit more deliberate on which ones I follow through on. Which is why, it's part of the reason why I didn't do the jazz release in the end, because I just don't think it was the right thing for me to do in terms of what I could give to that genre. Like, I don't think I'm saying anything in the jazz fusion space that hasn't already been said a lot better by people. Said a lot better by people who are well established in that space, who are, incredibly talented musicians who know a lot more about that world than I do. So I think my next release will probably just go back to that linear style of songwriting, but taking everything I've learned from the releases I've done since I've done a very linear style release. So I don't think I've talked about this anywhere else on social media because I've been quite quiet on it. But yeah, that's where my head is now. And if I can get myself away from playing Skyrim and cooking, then I'll start work on the new release.
Dude, what's your favorite Skyrim mod? I need to know that.
I have too many. I think I have over 300 mods in my load order.
No way.
Um,
That's
I
funny.
I think the best mod I've gotten recently. So there's so many cool things. There's like mods that add voices to your character, like AI voice, so your character speaks the lines on screen. That's a really cool one. Lots of mods that turn it into a proper like modern third person action game. I think one of the best ones is the I think it's ADXP/MCO framework that basically it's just a framework mod, but what it does is that when you attack in Skyrim, you're like your character stands still and they attack and you commit to that animation. Whereas Skyrim, you could ice skate, so you could attack and move while you
Yeah,
attack.
yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
this makes it a lot more like modern action games and Souls games, where like if you attack, you're standing there and you're vulnerable, and it makes the gameplay a lot more interesting. But yeah, I've got far too many mods. I joked that I enjoy modding the game more than playing it, but I'm currently playing it. Just making up different characters to play. And it's getting in the way of other games. Like I really need to play Baldur's Gate 3, for instance. But there's something really nostalgic and comforting about playing Skyrim. So I'm doing a lot of that. But I will. I keep telling myself I need to set aside the time and actually work on a new release, and kind of just leave it open ended and just see what comes out of it. Because I think I had a plan for like a follow up to Set Course for Andromeda and Homebound, and make like something to that effect, like a third album in that. But part of me is just like, I don't know if it really needs a third album. And secondly, like maybe I don't want that constraint. Maybe I just want to try something completely new and have the theme be open ended and just see where it goes.
That sounds like a great plan. Um, I want to ask you a question about the dilemma that almost every progressive artist has is, like, that gap of, hey, I want to spend my time being a better guitar player, and hey, I want to spend my time being a better songwriter. So do you get that dilemma?
Um, I think I've not necessarily gotten that dilemma because I don't think being the best guitar player ever was ever my focus. Like I think like I don't think it's controversial to say that like there are many guitarists in the scene who are far better players than I am. And I think part of my sort of journey as a musician is just making peace with that what I'm bringing to this space, I guess, is not the flashiest or most technically impressive guitar playing. I think I definitely think I could be a better player if I spent a lot of time practicing and you're really honing it down. Um, but I don't know. I think you could really see it in certain acts. Like I think Polyphia is a great example where they started out in that Djent space, but like some of their guitar playing on their new releases is absolutely phenomenal, and you can
Right.
tell the work they put in for that stuff. So I don't know. I think for me, I don't know if this is like it's not that I don't want to get better as a player. It's just I'm quite happy with where I am as a player, and if I learn more, that's great. But it's not the end goal with my music. I think if I'm ever limited in trying to express a musical idea by my playing, then that's probably when I'll like sit down and practice that thing over and over and over again so that I can say what I'm trying to say in my songwriting. But yeah, I've never been the kind of person that thinks that it's the end goal. It's a tool. Like technicality is a tool in
Right.
songwriting. So I think I, I've never really like articulated like that in the past, because I think when you're trying to ask a guy in his mid-20s that makes music about anime to talk about how this stuff relates to songwriting, you probably shouldn't be asking him because he's just a dude making anime music. But I think now I definitely think that like everything I do is in service of songwriting. Um, and I think that's always kind of been my focus. But the style of music I write, like it changes quite a lot. So I think as long as it serves the songwriting, I'm happy. And like I said, that dilemma kind of stopped existing for me when I've just like I'm okay with where I am as a guitar player. It and if I can't do something in a song that I want to do, then that's when I'll practice.
I see. Yeah. So you have all the tools equipped, and you just are doing your best to use them more efficiently at this time.
Yeah, I don't know if efficiency is the right word, but yeah, it's just like it has everything I do has to be like I said. I'm quite utilitarian in that aspect. I want to be able to play guitar well enough that I can express the musical ideas I want to express.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
if I'm not playing guitar well enough to express the idea, that's when I need to sit down and practice.
Fair enough. Fair enough, man. Fair enough. I yeah. Hydrate, guys. Whoever's watching this show,
Yeah.
hydrate. Yeah.
Yep.
So s- I have a question that succeeds that, which is when you were starting out, or like somebody like me who's starting out right now, we have that underdog mentality of like
Mm-hmm.
trying to get to the level, or maybe uh, try to be with people who are already established in the scene, and doing our best and trying to put our best foot forward. But uh, after a while, like when all of the things in our heads that we imagined, okay, this is I'm gonna tour with XYZ, or I'm gonna go on XYZ countries for tour and stuff. After those things are achieved, and you're no longer the underdog, I don't know if it's even a thing, but just so that I can get my point across, like, to be at the on the summit, I would say, or to be on the top, do you think like that affects how you write music, or did it affect at any point in time, or was it always the underdog mentality of putting the best foot forward, or like trying to outdo? Sorry, I would like to reiterate my question. Was it a thing that, hey, I would like to outdo my last release for every release that you do?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think in many ways, the imposter syndrome never really goes away. I think that's one thing that like I think is just very human, is that the imposter syndrome never really goes away. I think you learn to live with it. I think you learn to live with the ideas like, oh, why is my music being listened to when all these other like XYZ amazing technically gifted and also just great people, why isn't their music being listened to? Like, like we mentioned Liam, I wish a lot more people would listen to Liam's music. I think it deserves way more attention. Um, but then I think you also just want to see your friends do well.
Right.
But like it's just one of those things where like I don't know, that feeling never quite goes away. In terms of me personally, I think it just depends on what your goals are with the songwriting. Like, um, I like to follow through on ideas. So back in the early days, I just had ideas like the invent the universe idea or set course for Andromeda or Semp. I just had these ideas and like I just wanted to bring those ideas to life. Didn't have any overarching goal other than that. And I think after you have a body of work and people have expectations, I think that idea more comes into play where you feel like, oh, this has to be this release in terms of it has to be the best sounding release or it has to be better musically. And these things go in cycles. So I think with after Senpai 3, for instance, I went through a long time of not releasing a lot of music, and I just feel like I had to do something completely different, like the jazz fusion release, or I had to do something that would defy the expectations or succeed the expectations that people would have of what my music um, would be. And ultimately, I think that's probably why I never produced any music during that time period, is just because I had this expectation. And then part of why I reverted back to the style and kindness is because I think I just have a lot more fun when I'm not thinking like that. I think I enjoy music the most when it's just me sitting down in front of my computer with my recording software open with my guitar and just seeing what ideas come through. Or I have a lot of fun where I have a established theme like the Senpai theme or the Invent the Universe theme, and I just try to match that theme. Like I think that's where I have the most enjoyment. So yeah, I think it was definitely a case of like I was actually stopping myself from making music because I felt like I had to be better in a way. And
I see.
I think, yeah, I think it's just forgetting that I do this for fun, and people's expectations and people listening to my music and all this stuff, that's just a bonus. All of that was always meant to be a bonus. I never meant for this to be a career. The fact that it is like I said, it's a bonus, and I just need to remember that, like, the reason why, well, I think one of the reasons why I think that people liked my music in the first place was just because I just did something that I found enjoyable, and just people happened to also like what I also found enjoyable, and I should be okay with that. I think it's like, not to say that, like, I don't want to improve as a songwriter or musician, but I think making that the goal of a release, I think, was quite stifling. So in a
I see.
way, I'm putting less pressure on myself to make the best release possible. I've said in previous interviews that every release is like a snapshot in time of where you are as a musician.
Yes.
So
Yes, it really is.
yeah, so if I'm trying to say I need to be better than me in the snapshot in time, then I'm kind of not going by that mentality where I should just write and create the music that is me at that time. Whereas if I'm trying to be better than me in a previous time, I don't know, personally, I just feel like that just doesn't work for me. And I need to actually take myself back and remember that, like, remember the reason why I do this in the first place. It's just like, I really enjoy writing music. I really enjoy the recording and production process, and everything else is a bonus.
I see. This is like very subjective question. I'm not really sure if you can relate to it or not. But uh, being a being somebody who makes a career from progressive music, I know it's not the best field to be, like, in terms of monetary purposes. So, uh, h- how did you, like, come to terms with that, or was it never really a question about, like, how will I sustain myself in a genre which is this niche, especially, like, a few years ago? Because I feel after lockdown is when more people have started, like, uh, putting out their own music and being more uh, widespread about the genre itself. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the genre saturation definitely was happening before COVID as well. I think there's lots of discussions on, you know, the the sustainability of music. Um, if anything, the thing that's made music quite difficult, and to be fair, it's always been a difficult thing to make a career out of. Like, if you think about 100 people that go into the music industry, maybe 10 at best will make a career out of it, and maybe one of those 10 will make a absolutely phenomenal career and make a lot of money, and the other 9 will just be not just as the wrong word, but they'll be musicians in, like, the same way that someone's like a salaryman or like an engineer or a civil servant. Like, they're making that kind of money, and it's fine, they can live off of it. But I don't know, we tend to see music as I think we paint two very, like, opposing pictures in music, in that either you're the starving musician who makes no money but is doing it just purely for art, or you're like Taylor Swift, and there's no in between. But I think what's happened is that a lot of people are existing in that in between space now. um Music, like, love it or hate it, like, Spotify has democratized access to music. Having pretty much the entire catalog of recorded music from major labels and many many independent artists available at your on a thing on a thing of circuits in your hand for, you know 10-11 pounds a month. I mean, it's gotten more expensive and people will have their complaints about that, but, like, that's just an amazing idea, an amazing concept. And we could have our complaints about that, but, like, access to music has completely been democratized. The music creation process has been completely democratized. um so, like, more and more people are able to do this than ever. And I think people's expectations have changed. Like, maybe everybody thinks that because you have access to these tools and you have access to the distribution of music, that you should be able to make careers from this. But it's just always been really hard. It's even within, like, in many ways, I think because I was in a niche genre, it was easier for me to carve out my place in that niche. So, to make a sustainable career, and like for me, sustainable is like I can pay my bills, I can, I love cooking, so if I can buy fresh ingredients to cook, then I'm happy. I'm not the kind of person that feels like I need to constantly be making more money and constantly be doing that. Like in many ways, it's a lot more like I feel a lot more content just being happy with where I am, and like in many ways, my lifestyle and the way that I make money is really helpful to my wife because she works full time, and if I can be the one at home, making meals and helping around the house because of the time I'm afforded from my job and the way I make money, then that helps us as a family unit and also for family planning. So I'm seeing the benefits of like the way that I've done things and my mindset towards it as well. But yeah, I think in many ways, like just being within a niche where there's like if you can imagine like there's 100 prog artists and 1,000 people that want to listen to them, like if you can get 10 people to listen to you, that's way better than being like that's way better than being like 100,000 pop artists but only 150,000 people listening. I mean, the numbers are all wrong, but it's like obviously like the saturation is a lot.
The artist to listener ratio is less in the pop
yeah
scene
yeah
compared
like
to
it's
like the prog scene. Yeah,
it's so saturated. So like the prog scene's smaller and maybe the amount of money you can make is smaller, but like the the ratio I think is probably better if you can carve out that niche. And generally speaking, I think that at least within the context of like Western listeners, people are more dedicated to smaller prog acts than they would be to like I don't know, like big pop acts. Like I definitely find the passion and enthusiasm and the dedication of the prog fans I've met, like it's really heartwarming, and like they just they love this music and they love supporting artists and they're very deliberate about supporting artists.
right.
So yeah, I think it's a big thing. I have a lot of thoughts on the music industry as it is, and I think I'm seeing a lot of people that feel that it should be easier. But I guess I don't know. I'm maybe turning into that boomer who's like, well, music was always hard, and you're just learning right now
No,
by
no. I mean, tell me more about if I would love to know because I feel you can speak from experience, not just from yourself, but from people who were your peers or are still your peers about the music industry, especially in the Western space. I would say.
yeah. Yeah, because I think I mean like if you think about markets like Japan and Asia in general, the Japanese market is very insular. I think like you can succeed solely by being in the Japanese space, whereas I think for us, because we're more niche, we need to try and cultivate as large an audience from as many people as possible. In terms of the music industry, I think it's just like it has never been easier to create music than it is now. Like your
Right.
access to music software, your access to the tools for making any music of any genre, like it's never been more accessible, it's never been more affordable. It's not to say that it's cheap, like music is an expensive hobby, but like to get what you need to start out making music that you want to make, it's never been more achievable. To get your music out to people for people to listen to it, it's never been better. um but what we're just seeing, I think, is just it's just the results of the fact that we're lowering the barriers to entry. More people are getting involved, and I think maybe people expected the part of getting people to listen to your music to be as attainable as the music creation and the music distribution side. But unfortunately, it's just music's a very subjective thing, and people have tastes, and you know you can love your music, doesn't mean that anybody else will, which is why I feel like that side of it is a complete bonus, that people are willing to listen to like what some dude in Scotland made like 10 years ago about space. Like that's crazy to me that people would listen to me. And like I keep telling myself that I should never be entitled to that. Like the time that people listen to my music, or the money that people spend on stuff on Bandcamp or merch, like I should never be entitled to that. That's always that always comes from a place of love and enjoyment from the other people, and I should never feel that I deserve that in many ways. I think it's just,
I love that, man. I respect that so much.
yeah. I again don't want to sound like a boomer. I've got, you can see the gray hairs there, but like I think it's just the way that social media is making us feel about art and music and just, I guess, just content in general. Like it feels like it's there and it's consumed, and people see, famous TikTokers and stuff like that, and they have these 15-second videos, and they think like, oh yeah, I should be able to do that, and I should be able to get the what they have, and they don't realize the amount of hours that probably went into that 15-second video. It's like, just because the access is there doesn't mean that it's easy to gain a following, and that it's easy to actually make music that both that that you consider good, that other people consider good, and also that you're proud of. It's like being a person who makes something in the creative space, it's still as difficult as ever. Like making
Right.
music is still hard, learning how to play guitar is still hard. All these things are like, that's never changed. All that's changed is our access to like the creation methods and the distribution methods. That's gotten way easier, and it's never been better actually. But music's still hard. It's still a difficult thing to do. It's still something that you have to put so much effort in, and I can totally understand the frustrations of people that feel like they put in so much effort into music and they should be getting rewards for it. But ultimately, like, I don't know, I think the only way that you'll make money from music is if people listen to it. And if you make music and people don't listen to it, then it's a shame. But it's just the way, I guess it's the same concept of like, if you have a restaurant and you spend all your time on this amazing food that you think is great, and then no one comes to eat it. It's like that's how you make money as a restaurant, and in many ways that's how you make money as a musician. People need to consume and buy and stream your music, and in many ways that's not really different from how it used to be before streaming. Like, people still had to buy records and people still had to come to shows, and yeah, the way that you make money as a musician is not really changed. Streaming, I guess, like, has provided, like, as long as you're not on a label and the label's taking the majority of that revenue, like if you're independent, like it's a viable way of making of contributing to your overall income. But like, it's still the same. Like, people still need to consume, buy, stream, all that stuff with your music. Like, it's
Right.
not much has changed in that part of the music industry, I think.
I hear you. I have like a hypothetical question. So hypothetically speaking, let's just say if you had to do a release tomorrow, and I don't know where you stand on, like, the whole social media game. So would you play the social media game if you had to, like, release the song tomorrow? And what do I mean by social media game is, like, for each song having, like, scheduled post about of the song, having more content about the having short form, having it optimized, making the song quote unquote, like, hypothetically short, so that more people can listen to it, because apparently people won't listen to 10-minute songs anymore unless it's
Yeah.
Dream Theater or Tool, because that's nostalgia, right? So
Yeah.
just gauging, like, how you think right now with social media, since you have been off from it for a while. So would you be down to play the game?
I think I'd play it to a certain extent. I don't think I'd change my music to fit what people are expecting from social media. Um, and part of that is because, like I said, I'm not looking to be the biggest guitarist on Instagram or whatever. Like, I'm happy within the space that I've carved for myself, and it's allowed me to have a relatively, like, sustainable career where, like, I've never, like, since I've quit my job to do music full time, I think basically the only times I've come across financial difficulties has been like after touring, where it's just, you just end up in a hole because you've spent so much money on the tour that you're not made back. Um, But in terms of the social media stuff, I feel like I play it to a certain extent. I think part of why I feel grateful is I was around before that, so I was able to establish, people who follow and like my music and fans of my music before this was ever a thing, and that's been a great benefit to me. And I feel like probably if you ask anybody else who's in my position who released music back in the early 2010s or like the late 2000s, they probably feel the same way, in that like they have a benefit from being an OG or an incumbent. Um, but yeah, it's just, I guess what I'm gonna say is like I don't have to like it, but if that's the way that you have to, like if I was a new artist, then I could have whatever feeling I have about how social media has become. But if that's what you have to do to get your music out there to the people that could potentially listen to it, then that's what you do. Yeah, I mean, it's analogous to a guy that goes and works in an office, and you might not love everything about everything at work, but that's what you have to do to earn money. And I guess that's just what we have to do as musicians in the social media age, to get people to listen to our music. But I guess it feels particularly bad as a musician because when you go to that office, you're still going to get your paycheck at the end of the month, whereas there's no guarantees with stuff like this. So yeah, I guess I would do what's required in order to maximize my chances of getting people to listen to my music. But I obviously benefit from being like one of the incumbents, one of the people that was able to get my foot in the door before everything became an algorithm.
Fair enough, man. Yeah, and I really like the fact that like, because I imposter syndrome is a bitch. So having to draw that boundary between, oh, I'm getting complacent versus no, I'm actually satisfied. So that line is thin, and I'm glad that you are able to draw that line, because uh, everywhere you go, like you have influencers or everyone around, like trying to promote sigma male grind set, or you have to
Yeah.
work 25 hours in a day. By the way, I wrote a song called 25 hours, so it's like a thing. So you have to work 25 hours a day and stuff like that. You can't stop right now if you want to live a peaceful life in your 30s and stuff. And I don't really like, personally, it doesn't really make sense to me, because like, would you think, like, from your friends who were not musicians, who grinded their asses off in their 20s, do you actually think, like, they live a more peaceful life right now?
I think I honestly believe it's just up to the person. Some people are not happy unless they're working, and regardless of what they're working on, they're just not happy unless they feel like they're pushing themselves towards something, whether it be like personal fitness or like building a business. Or like one of my friends has started a business recently. He's working really really hard. He's had to deal with some family stuff, but like he's in a much better place ever since like he's gotten established with his business, and he's worked really hard, and I'm really really happy for him. um some people, like, regarding the social media stuff, people, there is a really, I think like I come from an age where you had to approach the internet with like a degree of cynicism to survive. Otherwise you'd get scammed of your whole life savings and stuff like that, or fall for some crazy stuff. But I think it applies more now than ever, in that people telling you that there's something that you're missing from your life on social media because you don't work hard enough. That line is almost invariably followed by the way, by my course on how to.
Yes.
It's like people
Yes.
telling you that you're not good enough are trying to sell you something, and this is not a new thing. It's just that it's being adapted for social media. Like people sell skincare products by telling you that your skin's not good enough without it. It's like it's the same thing, but we're doing this to people's like sense of self-worth. And I think that's probably why social media and society is getting more polarized, is because we're we're trying to get to their like sense of being and their identities with social media. And which is why I believe it's like it's always good to approach all of this with like a lot of healthy degree of cynicism, because other people especially random people on the internet, shouldn't dictate to you how you should feel about yourself as a person and the stuff that you do. Um, so I've been very, very, I guess, fortunate to discover like where I'm happiest and what I enjoy doing. Like for instance, I think a really, really, really common thing is like, people saying that you're worthless as a man unless you have X amount of women doting over you, and like I don't understand that space at all. But it's just like
That's every
I was
prog
told,
guy's fantasy, isn't it?
yeah, every pro guy's fantasy until you play a show and it's 90% dudes. So it you get what you pay for. But I mean, like I don't know, like I was perfect. Like from a personal like standpoint, I was perfectly content being single. Like I was happy because it was just like it just wasn't something that I was like defining my happiness over. And I'm obviously very happy because like I've met someone and like I'm married now and I'm very very happy about that. But it's like my wife and I both feel the same, that we were happy as we were. We're happy with who we are as people, and no amount of like social media telling you that you're not good enough is going to bring us down. And I think what's important is that you yourself being the person who decides whether there's something you need to change, and taking that advice from people that you trust and care about, like your friend group and your family, and like if there are people that you trust, they are the people that you should be taking advice from, or whether you need to change something. um and it shouldn't be social media. And I think that, yeah, I just feel like there's just too much stuff on the internet trying to tell you that you're not good enough. And like I think that's just by design. I think everything is meant for you to keep your eyes on the little phone screen that you have. So telling you that the world is terrible, or that the politics is terrible, or that you aren't good enough because you need to sigma alpha grind male rizlet. I don't. I all the Gen Alpha slang I know is from a video called Skyrim Brain Rot. There's a video where it's the Skyrim opening, but they replace everything with Brain Rot Gen Alpha slang, and I hate that I find it funny, but I find it absolutely hilarious. But like, yeah, it's all that stuff. I just feel like I don't know. I have a very I was like I don't consider myself religious, but I was raised as a Theravada Buddhist because my parents are Buddhist, and like I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a person in Burma who's not Buddhist. Like the majority of people are there Buddhist. So I was raised with those kind of mindsets, and like, but I think there's a lot of value in trying to find a point where you're like, okay, like if I try to go for more, I'm probably just gonna make myself upset that I'm not getting what I want. Whereas if you're kind of like, this is fine, then there is there's a level of contentedness and peace that you can find if you're just like, no, I think I've done okay, you know. And
Right.
like I said, it's not to say that you shouldn't strive for more. It's just about finding that balance, because like for instance, if I wanted to be like the world's best guitarist and touring all the time and doing stuff, I think there will definitely be a point where I'm definitely making myself miserable trying to achieve that goal, and I would have been a lot happier if I just chilled out a bit and found a point where I'm just like, this is okay, you know?
I totally get that. I think I read an analogy somewhere where an astronaut was in space, and like people asked them like, "Hey, how does space look like?" And he was like, "It's cold, dark, empty, and there's nothing there. And when I come back down here, it's beautiful. So like whatever we are looking for was already here and not
Yeah.
in space. So that
If
really,
any if anything, going to space probably created that perspective, right? It created a new
yeah."
perspective where what he already had was the beautiful thing, and he just had to change how he looked at it.
Exactly, exactly. And I'm glad you have that. I think I'm really happy personally to hear that, because as a 21-year-old myself who wants to like take on the world,
Hmm.
quote unquote, it's really nice to know that hey, it's not always about that, or it doesn't have to be about that, and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that experience. um I think we spoke about like some very deep stuff, so I have a really on a very different tangent. There has to be some very exciting and funny touring stories. So I want to hear some of those. So if you can recollect some of them, I would love to hear them.
Yeah, there's it's just silly little things. I feel like when you tour, like you're just a bunch of like I was very lucky to go on tour buses. You end up just making like stupid in jokes. So we would always call like on the Skyhopper tour, everybody called Keshav Chacha uncle in Hindi, and he
Nice.
hated it. And it was like he was just like, dude, I'm not anybody's uncle. Don't call me that. But we just called him Chacha. It was just that was just what we called him. Aaron from Intervals, like he always called buses like giant metal fart rockets because I like men will be men, and if you stick 12 of them on a bus, then it's just gonna be one big smelly fart rocket. Um, yeah, just those are two that come to mind, but like yeah, just crazy stories from tour bus drivers. Like they've like some of the bus drivers have literally seen and done it all. They've I remember I think they said was it Megadeth or Slayer? They said that like one of those bands was like the most boring band in terms of like they would play their show, go into the bus and sleep, and that's all they did. Um,
Damn.
Whereas like it was some of the smaller bands who were like absolute party animals and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, lots of fun stuff happened when we were touring. I remember trying to get visas for the US tour. Um, my friend Jack, who was playing bass for that tour, went to the US embassy in London. It was crazy the amount of hoops we had to jump through to get US visas. And our experience touring before was in Europe, where this is pre-Brexit, so like you could just go and tour and there'd be no like paperwork or anything. So doing all that paperwork was like a bit of an eye opener. But my friend Jack went to the US embassy along with the rest of us to do an interview, and the interview cost $190. This is on top of $4,000 of visa and legal fees.
Shit.
This is like I don't know how open and transparent people are with finances, but like that is how expensive it was in 2017 to go on tour in the US, and it's
Wait,
probably only gotten more.
$4,000 for US visa? That's heaps expensive than an Indian trying to go to US. And you know about the immigration thing, right? It's harder for Indians. So like this is quite astounding to know that it's that expensive
Yeah,
for
but
somebody from a UK.
The thing is, I asked guys from Protest the Hero, and they'd have to do the same thing. So it's a different type of visa for a band, but like they're still having to do this just coming from Canada. As soon as you start trying to earn money in the US, it like they throw a lot of obstacles in your way. But yeah, it's super expensive to get the visa. And then my friend Jack went to the embassy, and they were like, "Oh yeah, your passport's damaged, so we can't give you a visa." And like by damage, it was just normal wear and tear that someone who had a passport for several years had, but like he had to get a brand new passport. He missed the first show in in Detroit, and he could only meet us in Canada, so we had to get separate flights for him as well.
Oh
So
no.
so it's not a funny story, but it's just like the stuff that happens. Like whenever you see bands that have visa issues, it's always stuff like this. It's going to be something completely trivial, or someone took issue with something on paperwork, and um it's just crazy that you have to spend so much money on US visas. And then like that's the thing that stops you, is that someone's passport was damaged. But yeah, I can't think of any other funny stories. Like I have to think specifically,
That's
but
totally
like
fine.
it's I mean it's just a lot of fun. I think looking back on it, like it's been 2019 was the last time I toured, so it's been 5 years.
Five
It's
years,
been a
yeah.
good while since I've been on the road, but like if I never toured again, I would have no regrets. I think I've had a lot of fun, and I've got to experience
I'm glad to hear that.
I've got to experience really passionate fans, and just had so many interesting conversations. I was really really big into playing League of Legends back back then as well, and I would have like people ask me about my favorite League of Legends champions, or just anime character. Like the conversation, I remember a lot of great conversations. A funny story, I remember on the Sky Harbor tour, our last show was in Paris, and we had like my friend Jack had just gotten like as much alcohol as he could find, like fizzy champagne and some other stuff. Like, I think he got brandy as well. And I remember playing that show, and it was absolutely chaotic. And then there's a guy in the crowd dressed in an anime schoolgirl outfit, like the sailor outfit. He came to that show dressed like that. Um, so that was really funny and surreal. I think also just like I posted so much absolute shit on the internet back then. I was a serial shit poster, and people would come and like they would call me the things that I was calling myself in those shit posts and stuff like that. So like, yeah, that was really funny. I think I don't know if I'll get back into it, but yeah, it was just funny to see that like people read these pointless things I was putting out on the internet and like saying them to me at shows.
I see, I see. That's lovely to hear, man. That's lovely to hear. I think coming back just for a bit on the US visa thing, it's a lot harder now because of the immigration thing, and what people generally do, especially from India, is like even if they don't want to go, they will try to get a visa and they'll book the slots for the interviews. So like I was invited to NAM for this year, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, cool. Hey, I'm preparing it from July. I will easily get it. So then I go and check on the website of like, when's the earliest date I can get. Do you have any guesses, like, when was the earliest date I could get?
Probably sometime in 2025.
August 2025. Like, that's ridiculous, right? So,
Yeah.
and I was like, why is it so long? And they're like, oh, people just try and, like, even if they don't want to go, they'll try their luck. I mean, that makes no sense. Like, I'm like, this was the first opportunity in my life where I was invited to NAM. I was like, shit, I can't go because of some dumb idiot who wants to just go there and do this to Statue of Liberty. So, I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
that's totally
crazy.
fine.
My wife for a work trip. Normally in the UK, if you wanted to go to the US, you just get an ESTA. So like for the like, if I was just going as a tourist, it's quite easy to go to the US for us. But like if I for touring, I had to get a specific type of visa that was very very expensive, and I had to get an immigration attorney involved. And like I was very lucky because Pliny recommended me somebody, so I used the same person that he used for their visa. But my wife recently had to get a US visa because one of her friends is Sudanese, and she went to Sudan with her
Okay.
friend back, I think in 2018, 19, I can't remember. But Sudan is on a list of countries that the US say that if you go to this country, you're not allowed to get this visa exemption. So she had to actually apply for a US visa because she visited a country that just happened to be on the US's shit list.
Oh, damn.
So it's
That's
it's
so
like
interesting.
it doesn't, it's not just musicians. I just think it's just the US wants to make it quite difficult to go there. I mean, it's up to them. I'm not gonna comment too much on the state of that, but it's just, I guess it's up to them. And we have our own things to deal with in the UK with Brexit, where touring Europe, like I've not had to deal with it, but there's just so many more hoops you have to jump through now. And I'm hoping that the by now they would have figured out, because it was such a slapdash thing. They just left without actually sorting stuff out. So I'm hoping that by now there will be agreements in place to allow musicians to tour Europe easier without too much friction. Like I said, I've not had to do that yet, but yeah, I'm just hoping that
Yeah, I hope so that
it's
too.
there.
I mean, yeah, it would be a lot better and convenient to, like, not
Mm-hmm.
having to worry about a visa, because whenever a visa is involved, there's extra money that goes in
Mm-hmm.
there, which could have been used for, like, more convenience on the tour. So I
Yeah,
totally
it's
totally
also
get.
stuff like carnets. Like I think that's how what they're called, where when you tour into a place that you don't have, like when I used to tour Europe, like you could just get on the bus and go. Like there was no checks. Whereas now, I think I don't know if it's still the case because I don't know what agreements are in place, but you have to do something called a carnet where you have to list out every single piece of gear you have, the value, and you basically have to show them that this is what you're bringing in and this is what you're going to bring out, and you're not going to try like sell it or do anything funny with it. You have to declare everything.
Damn.
So it's just like we had to do this for the US as well, but I think with the US it was different because we knew we were going into that. Whereas like I think if I'm touring now in Europe, I'm gonna be like, we didn't have to do this before. Back in my day, we could just rock up and
Yeah.
play shows. Um, but yeah, it's just a lot of friction. I think just in general, like people think that um, being a musician, like I don't know if they still think this, but there's a sort of aspect of glamour around like touring the world and making music
we can
and
we
stuff.
can blame Pliny for that. Like, he whatever he posts online looks like, it's the dream life. But I know that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the social media thing. Like obviously they have a lot of fun. Like Pliny and his band are all lovely people and they have a lot of fun on tour. But there's just a lot of shit that you have to go through to even be in that position. And I think they post all that stuff because they'd rather forget about all the hoops they have to jump through to even be there.
Yeah, maybe, who knows.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's it from my end. I had like a questionnaire sort of thing that I needed your
Okay.
insights on, and it was lovely talking to you, man, Sithu. Thank you so much for taking the time for, like, catching up about what you've been up to, and, like, where you're heading with music and stuff. I'm pretty sure, like, your fans will be benefited from this conversation a lot about what's been up, and maybe some of them will hit you up for some Skyrim mods. So just just a disclaimer there. But yeah,
Yeah.
man, if you have anything to add, or, like, an announcement of any sort, like, I would love for you to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything specific in the works. Like I said, I have ideas. I think I'm just a bit more like deliberate about which ideas I follow through on these days. But yeah, I'm definitely gonna keep making more music. I'm definitely gonna be, definitely gonna reappear on social media and do stuff. Um, it's just that I'm a like I have a mortgage now. It's funny to say that. Like yesterday, I mowed the lawn. So I'm becoming the suburban house dad thing. And honestly, it's a lot of fun. I posted it a few times on social media. Like one of my passions is cooking, so like I'm doing that as well. I'm very happy. I'm enjoying my life. I think I wouldn't be in this position without all the support as well of everybody that's listened to my music, streamed my music, bought my music, bought merch, came to shows. I'm always going to be like infinitely thankful for everybody that supported me along the way. And all I can say is I'll hopefully repay your kindness and love with just more music. And I don't have any plans to stop. So yeah, look for more music soon.
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. That's awesome. Thank you once again for the chat.